Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am participating in the Look for Less challenge hosted by Yami, the Latina next door. This month, her co-host is Casey from Coffee with My Sunshine. I will link to both of their channels in my description box below. For my Look for Less challenge, I decided to make a farmhouse sign for my home. I found this sign online for $59, which is a little too steep for my budget. If you like this kind of content, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. And of course, you can always find me on Instagram at Nicole Northgarden. Here we go. For this Look for Less, I decided to use this backyard farmer sign as my inspiration piece. I found it two places online, one for $59 and one for $62. But I love to garden and I love the colors and the ticking stripes in this, and I thought it would look great in my house. So for this project, you'll need a frame. I used this thrifted frame. You'll also need balsa wood, which you can get from the craft store or from Home Depot, and you'll need to score it and break it. I forgot to take footage of that. Then you'll need a graphic from your printer. I just said printed out Backyard Farmer with Microsoft Word. This is my scoring tool and my square that I used, some sandpaper for the frame, paint brushes in the sizes you like. I also used paint pens for my lettering from Walmart, and some craft paint. I used black. I used brown at first, but you'll see later I actually wound up using some gray as well. And then paint sponges and a paint plate. And first I go ahead and I sand my frame because it's an unfinished frame. There's always going to be little splinters and slivers on it. So I just wanted to sand those off before I used the paint. I also got the price tag off. And then I use a slightly dampened rag to wipe off all of the dust from the sanding. And then I go ahead and I use my brown craft paint and I kind of mix up the three colors because I'm actually going to use this as a stain. I apply the paint with the makeup sponges because that's a nice way to just get a little bit of paint on the wood, and then the wood grain absorbs a little bit and then shows through, and that's how the paint winds up acting like a stain. But you can see here when I did the bottom of the frame, a weird pattern showed up. I don't know if there's some kind of defect in the wood. I did try to get it off by sanding, but it wouldn't come off. So at that point I decided to just let it dry, and then I would go back with a different color paint instead. So while the frame was drying, I got my letters and I did my technique where I color on the back with a pencil and turn it into tracing paper. And then I line it up. I use my square as a ruler just to make sure that everything is positioned properly. I should add that I did spray paint the balsa wood with Rust-Oleum flat white spray paint before all this, but I forgot to take footage. And then I used painter's tape and I just taped the top of the paper where I would be tracing. I learned this from Bargain Bethany, and this, by not taping the bottom as well, you can lift it up and look at what you're doing as you go along, which was really helpful because I had left out like part of a letter A. So you can see here I lift it up and check my progress, and then I go ahead and trace farmer. And with one last check, I make sure all the parts of the letters are there, and I take it off, and you can see my nicely traced letters that I can now fill in using my chisel tip paint pen. My method for tracing the letters is that I use the corner of the chisel tip, so the thin part of the chisel tip, to trace the outside edges of all the letters first. And I do this because once the outside of all the letters looks good, it doesn't matter kind of what you do on the inside. So by making sure you use a steady hand and slow, long strokes on the outsides, then you can kind of do whatever when you go and fill in the insides. I also always keep the stencil nearby so that I can reference it to see what the original letters looked like in case my tracing isn't perfect. I can see, is something at a 90-degree angle or should something be curved? And it helps you make sense of your tracing a little bit better so that you can match the original a little more closely. Once the lettering was done, I set it aside and I grabbed my Rust-Oleum aged gray chalk paint. So this is just something I keep in the house. I use it a lot. And I decided to use that on the frame and to go ahead and just give it a full paint job instead of trying to do a staining because of that weird defect in the wood. And I go ahead and use makeup sponges to get on the interior edges and on the exterior edges just to get the paint in there a little bit better. It's just a little bit easier. Another tip from Bargain Bethany. And once the frame is painted, I go ahead and start making the lines so that I can put painter's tape along the top and the bottom to make the, I don't know if they're like ticking stripes or whatever you saw on the original sign. And I just make sure that everything is square, and I block off where I'm going to paint. This is where I made a mistake and I actually corrected it later. I should have at this point painted with white paint first because that helps to seal off the tape, and then it gives you a really clean line. So on this first set of lines, I had some feathering where it leaked kind of underneath the tape because I didn't do that. On the second set of lines, you'll see that I did do that. So pro tip, definitely paint first with your base color and then go back and paint with the color you're trying to apply when you're making straight lines with painter's tape. But correcting the feathering is easy enough. If it happens to you, you just get a little white paint and a very fine brush and a steady hand. And I just went along and painted over the feathering. And it's fine because this is going to be kind of a rusticy looking sign anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Then I applied the second round of painter's tape, and here you can see I paint over the painter's tape with the white paint, giving that base coat, and then I go ahead and fill in with black paint after the white paint is dry. Obviously you need to wait till it's dry, and then this will give me a nice, much cleaner line on the second set of lines. I set the lettered sign aside to dry, and I got my Rust-Oleum aged glaze out because I just wanted to give a little bit of distress to the frame without doing too much sanding. So I use a damp rag and you just kind of wipe it on and wipe it off until you like the way that it looks. And then I get my sign and I peel off the second set of painter's tape, and those lines were much better and I didn't have anything to correct because I had done that white base layer. And the last thing I did, the sign looked a little too pristine, so I took some white paint and a very stiff stenciling brush, and I basically almost had a completely dry brush. I wiped most of the paint off, and I just lightly went over the top to give it a little bit of a distressed look. And here's the finished product. Then I took my glue gun and glued it into the frame. Now, if you're going to use this outside, I recommend using silicone for this step, and then you're going to need to use a layer of polyurethane or some type of outdoor protectant for it. But I'm going to use mine indoors. I really like it and I don't want it to get ruined outside, and it really looks nice with my house, so I'm going to use mine inside. Here's the finished product. I really like how it looks. And here's the side by side. Theirs is slightly different dimensions, but that just is a design choice. I wanted mine to be a little more square. Theirs was $59 and mine was $5.50. Thank you so much for watching my Look for Less challenge. If you like this kind of content, I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel, and you can always find me on Instagram at Nicole Northgarden. Thanks for watching.